Welcome back, baseball fans, to the Fall Carryover League that has been wrapped up. We had a World Series, eliminated the last two teams, the Phillies, the runners-up, the Red Sox, the world champions, put the final 76 cards into the 76 box to close it up. And that puts us firmly into debuting the early steps for the 1977, 78, 79, 80 Fall League. And we're going to look at a bunch of sheets today and show you the proper way of addressing the Carryover League. And by proper, what I mean is, in the Summer League, if you followed the Summer League, we had cards from 1984 with 1969, 70, and 71. And that was because I did this experiment where I wanted to mix the eras without following a proper chronology, which was a lot of fun. But what it also did was it enabled, at the end of the 1984 period for those players, 240 players saw their careers ending abruptly. You know, guys from 1984 who were playing great baseball: Don Mattingly, Cal Ripken, Wade Boggs, Kirby Puckett, Tony Gwynn, all the heroes you're aware of. And they were disappeared because they weren't playing baseball back in 1969, 70, and 71. So that off-season, the Summer League off-season, is operating under a certain set of rules. But today, I want to show you the proper way of running a purely chronological season and how effective the carryover rules work. And that is that the 76, 77, 78, 79 season, once that concludes, 8 players disappear from 1976. And then in the following draft, 2 players from 77, 2 in 78, 2 in 79, and 2 in 80 will become part of the next Fall League. And so we've been following these elimination videos as well. I'm just kind of scrolling here. And I've done eliminations of all the teams and indicated in a rough draft form if a player should be kept, if he should be put on waivers, or should have been retired. And the math is computed into this number here: 10,000 units for a keeper, 100 units for a waiver, and a single unit for a retiree. If you add this all up for a team, the number here would be 40,202, and this shows you if somebody is right or wrong. The Orioles are currently wrong, Red Sox are wrong, Yankees are wrong, and the Blue Jays are okay. So the Blue Jays, their eliminations are ready to go unless they want to make more moves. So once you have all this information that I've done in these elimination videos, you have a cumulative number here. Now, the number 40400, well, it's just incorrect. The number is supposed to be 40202. Let me go over here for a second. 40202 times 32, if you factor that out, is this number. And what you want to do is draw a line after the 8 and after that 4. And if you do that, you will see 128 keepers, 64 waivers, 64 retirees. I printed that number there. That's what the entire league is supposed to have. This is the current value set for the league. Now, I also happened to compute already, to make this easier, that we have 64 retirees, which is on target. There was actually between 57 and 61 guys who retired, meaning that they didn't have a card in 1977. But I took some really bad waiver guys, and I also made notes for other waiver guys. For instance, even the Toronto Blue Jays here, like Terry Harmon, he actually has a card in 77, but he hits a $183. Marty Perez has a card, he hits 231, but they're currently retired. The point was to get to the constant, the retiree card, And once you have that constant there, then you can move between the keeper and waiver to support the math. And when we do that, you see keeper is 119. We're 9 short of where we want to be. And when we look at waiver, it's 73. We're 9 above where we want to be. That means that 9 $100 players who are on waivers need to find homes throughout the league. And how do you do that? You have a trade carousel. Think of it like the merry-go-round or the dumbwaiter in the table with the ketchup and the mustard and the pepper, and you keep spinning that until you find the thing you want. It's a carousel where all the teams put their trades up simultaneously, and when all the teams sign off, then it's like one large trade. If everybody's happy, and that's how you get multi-team trades happening. And basically, I'm just doing that by trying to create some balance without having a rooting interest in any of these teams. And so, let me go to the next. This is before the draft carousel. I'm going to click on this link down here where it says fixed. And when we get to fixed, lo and behold, look at this number up top here. 128, 64, 64. So I did the carousel, and I got everybody at 40202. You see Baltimore's there. You see Boston's here. The Yankees, Toronto, etc. So that was done through a series of trades, and that's what the next tab will be about. And I will go through these trades that happened after the season ends before the next draft begins. So we start, I'm going to scroll up. We start in the American League East. And what you're going to see a lot of the times is you'll see a player traded from one category for a player in a different category because each of these teams needed to increase or decrease accordingly. And for notably, I'm going to start with Boston since they won the World Series. So Boston basically made just one move, and it was inconsequential. They traded Rick Miller, who was they put on waivers, to the White Sox for Carlos May, who's being retired. Basically, if you recall, Rick Miller was being wasted away in Fenway because the Red Sox had Yastrzemski, Lynn, Rice, Carbo, Dwight Evans. So he was wasting away there. Now, just because he got traded to the White Sox, he's still on waivers, meaning the White Sox will waive him, but they could keep him if they change their mind. So you're going to see a lot of waiver guys getting traded for retired guys. Now, if a trade seems to be imbalanced, I will assign a token to a team as compensation. What a token is a move, an extra move in the draft, either sliding up or down in the draft or the first crack of free agents once the draft ends. At the end of a draft, not all teams will have 20 players because some teams will improve guys and they'll have 18, 19 players. And then once the draft's over, they have to go sign free agents to fill up the 20-man roster. That's where tokens come into play because a team with the most tokens gets first crack at those. So the tokens column here will be denoted when it's important, and I'll put a comment as to why. So that was Boston's only move, and we're going to move on. So the next team in the American League East, we start from the American League East and work our way to the National League West. Yellow guys are waivers, red guys are being retired. Baltimore makes an inconsequential trade. Reliever Dyer Miller on waivers to Milwaukee for retired catcher Bill Fahey. That's a non-interesting move. Okay, our first interesting move is here. Baltimore trades a keeper, a good guy, Bobby Grich, who came up through the Oregon organization. He's traded to the California Angels for retired Willie Davis and a token. And the comment is, Bobby Grich, that the Orioles they want a token for making this move because it helps the Angels out, but doesn't really help the Orioles out. So this will give the Orioles an extra move in the draft to move up or down in the draft should they seem fit. The next move, Baltimore immediately ponies up the token as the Texas Rangers take the rookie McGregor card, who had like 15 innings. They send McGregor to Baltimore. Baltimore sends Omar Moreno to Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh sends Mike Jorgensen to Texas. So I award, since Texas could have kept McGregor, which would have been a smarter thing to do, I awarded Texas the token. I deducted it from the Orioles, and Pittsburgh was a cancellation. They net nothing as far as tokens go. So in these two moves, Baltimore is back to normal. They gained a token, then they lost it right there. We'll keep going. Yankee inconsequential trade, Dick Allen and aging Dick Allen on waivers for retired Ray Burris to the Cubs. Next trade, and this is going to be a fun one. Here's how it happens for me. Reggie. Okay, so the Yankees are going to finally get Reggie Jackson. Now, Reggie, his 76 card should have been for Baltimore, but he played for Oakland. He doesn't show up in Baltimore, and so Oakland finally ships him to the Yankees. And instead of him just signing as a free agency, that's what these tokens are for, and the trade compensation. Instead of Reggie just getting signed as a free agent, the A's get a corner outfielder, Tom Poquette, to swap out with a corner outfielder, Reggie Jackson, and the draft token. And not to mention that, believe it or not, Tom Poquette hit 302 for Kansas City in one of the years in this period, and 311 in another year in this period. So they do get a little bit of production back for losing Reggie, plus the token. All right, next up, the Yankees shipped Roy White. They have an excess of outfielders for retired Bailey. Now here, I don't compensate the Yankees because I didn't think Roy White was really that valuable. He's near the end of his career, only has a couple years left. He doesn't have a lot of value, so it wasn't worth giving them a token for that. Okay, here we have a first, the most carousel-ish trade in the series. This is where you start, the team that starts the carousel ends the carousel. So, here's the movement. The Dodgers have the rights to Bill Buckner, but they have a glut at first base and outfield. So they move Buckner to the Cubs. The Cubs send a really good 1979 Jim Spencer card to the Yankees. The Yankees send a pretty mediocre to below average Kevin Soche card to the Phillies. The Phillies send one of their relievers, Joey McLaughlin, back to the Cubs to take Spencer's spot. And oh, by the way, the Cubs then have to send the rights to Manny Trio to the Padres as a second baseman, and their waiver second baseman, Mike Tyson, ends up back on the Dodgers, who are going to waive him anyway. So the net of all this movement is that the Yankees have to pony up a token because they're going to end up with a really good Jim Spencer card in 1979. And the Dodgers are going to gain a token because they basically gave away Bill Buckner for nothing except clearing space in their roster. And the reason why it's a good deal, or the reason why the Dodgers aren't too concerned with this move is they get a token, and the guys they're going to keep are going to be Steve Garvey, Ron Cey, Bill Russell, and Don Sutton. So they don't have room for Buckner. So that's why they had to make that move. All right, next deal in the American League North, a retired Steve Ranko for a keeper Raleigh Eastwick. That doesn't really move the needle. Okay, next three-team carousel with evolving left-handed pitchers. Doug Rowell moves from Cleveland to Houston. Houston sends Ken Brett to the Dodgers, and the Dodgers send Rick Waits back to Cleveland. Again, the Dodgers, again, get another waivered guy. I'm not going to give the Dodgers a token. I also sort of weight this as something that's kind of my gut decision that I don't feel the Dodgers really need the token, too. So that's part of the situation. Moving on, Milwaukee will send a keeper, nice keeper, Bobby Mercer, to the Cubs for Jose Cardinal. I could have awarded a comp pick here, except Jose Cardinal could have been a keeper, but the Cubs said, again, the Cubs had too many guys, or excuse me, Milwaukee had too many guys, so he gets waived. Now here's the first instance again where we see a keeper, Minnesota sending Dan Ford to the Angels for a retired Willie Crawford. That is worth a token because Dan Ford actually plays for the Angels and is a productive player for their 1979 and 1982 teams in the outfield. Two seasons where the Angels won the American League West and almost made it to the World Series. So that was worth a token to me. Next move, Kansas City Royals, this is interesting, trade Hal McRae to Florida for Jose Morales. Now you're thinking that should be worth a token because Hal McRae's pretty good, but reality is McRae's not really an all-star again until 1982, which is 6 years from now. And actually, Jose Morales being put on waivers, they don't have to put him on waivers. He actually hits 300 in a couple of these years. So that's why I didn't award a token. The most questionable move here, Marty Patton from Kansas City goes to Texas for a retired player, and I did award a token, and the Rangers aren't happy that I did that, but it's sort of like if I had a half token, I would have said Texas pony up a half a token, and Florida pony up a half a token to Kansas City, but I don't split things in half like that. So the Texas has to pay the full token price here. But don't forget, Texas got a token way up here. Yeah, for the McGregor move. So they're back to breaking even again. All right, next move, Doc Ellis getting old and Nelson Briles getting retired. Not much there. Next move, Milwaukee trades Jim Slayton to Oakland for Sal Bando. This is a pretty cool trade. Bando actually does go from Oakland to Milwaukee, has a good year in 1978. And Oakland has been, their starting rotation has been decimated. So they like to have Jim Slayton. They lost Catfish Hunter, they lost Blue Moon Odom, they lost Vida Blue, they lost Ken Holtzman. So Oakland could certainly use a nice starting pitcher, and Milwaukee had an abundance of right-handed starting pitching to give up. Next move, Padres trade a retired Al Downing to Florida for Nino Espinosa and follow the bouncing ball because Nino Espinosa is going to move on to 2 more teams because it gets complicated after this. All right, so the Padres then take the Espinosa card and a third baseman, 1977 Dave Chalk. And the reason this is green, this is the actual card, just like they were up here. You know, when it has the year, that means it's the actual Strat card. It doesn't mean like a draft pick. So they're actually giving Oakland a third baseman to replace Sal Bando here for a reliever, Atkinson, and a retired player. And then in the next move, Oakland then sends a left fielder, Joe Rudy, to the Angels for Don Hood. A couple of waiver guys move. And the idea here is that Oakland needs to create a space in left field for Ricky Henderson to arrive. And Joe Rudy was a 1 in left field, so that would prevent that from happening. And Rudy plays for the Angels during this period, and the Angels are trying to, you know, use guys like Joe Rudy and Don Baylor and the other guy they just got, Dan Ford and Carney Lansford, and try and win the West. Oakland is kind of, I'm not sure. I think they're in a rebuild mode, but we'll see. We thought they were in a rebuild mode last year, and they won the division. All right, Charlie Williams for Dick Bosman, another non-essential move. Mike Cuellar for Mike Lum. Cuellar was tossed in this trade too. So Cuellar was retired in Oakland, retired in San Diego, now he'll be retired in Texas. And that's why I said about carousel. You're just moving placeholders. They're not of any value anymore. Let's go to the National League, and we're going to go straight to the big one. The big one I've been talking about involving 2 Hall of Famers. And here it is. It's a big one to process here. 5-for-5 deal between the Mets and the Cincinnati Reds involving Hall of Famer Tom Seaver, his 1977 card, which is actually for the Cincinnati Reds anyway, so he should have been on the Reds already, but he wasn't. Hall of Famer, oh wait a minute, there seems to be a little asterisk right there. You know, Hall of Famer Pete Rose. These Seaver and Rose, kind of a virtual Hall of Fame cancel out is the way I look at it. And then some other interesting players to move back and forth here. 77 Tommy Helms card returns to Cincinnati, who he once played for. Clay Carroll, it returns to the Reds, but the Reds will put him on waivers because they're full of guys in the bullpen. How about Joe Torre, throwing him into this deal? The Reds are just going to retire him. They need a retired guy, and that was one of the retirees. And so, again, the retired guys don't really matter. They're going to be retired wherever they go. 78 Jerry Grody, just because the Mets are going to have a glut at catching because they have John Stearns. And what the Mets get out of this, they get Rose. In year one, they're going to put Rose at third base. They're not going to put him at first base like the Phillies did. They're going to put him at third. The 77 Ray Knight card actually plays shortstop. So in year one, Knight is going to play short, Rose is going to play third. Then after that, Knight will move to third base, Rose will move to first base. And if you remember, Ray Knight actually plays for the Mets in the early 80s. So he might play this entire time for the Mets and not even go to the Astros. They get Buddy Schultz in the bullpen because they're going to lose Tug McGraw in a future trade. They also get Pat Zachary, who we know was part of the Seaver trade. And Cincinnati gets rid of that first baseman, Bobby Beal, who they didn't like anyway. He was more of a defensive first baseman. And the Mets can actually use some defense. So that's how it was 5 for 5. The years match up, 2 77s and a 78. And then the 76 cards match up. The Mets needed 2 keepers, Rose and Zachary, and the Reds needed a waiver guy and a retired guy. But what the Reds really wanted was Tom Seaver. It's really Tom Seaver for basically all that. Because Seaver's going to be there for at least 5 years, if not longer. And Rose has only 2 more good years left after Cincinnati, 79 and 81 in Philadelphia. And then after that, it's kind of yucky. That's the blockbuster in the National League. Mets aren't done dealing, though. They are going to do a lot of dealing. All right, now they're thinking about a token. And so the Mets are going to send John Matlack to the Rangers for retired Vic Albury. And the Mets, that's because Matlack's next great year is 1978, and it's with the Rangers. He's no longer good with the Mets anymore. So he gets them to the Rangers, and the Rangers have to pay a token for that, and that's what the Mets wanted, a draft token. All right, now another little carousel involving left-handed relievers. The rights to Dave Tomlin to Cincinnati. Cincinnati moves Sid Manji to Colorado, and then Dave Hamilton to Portland, who will promptly put him on waivers. No reason to award a token for a bunch of lefty relievers there. Nice little one-for-one move. Corner outfielders Jay Johnstone for Bate McBride. Jay Johnstone coming off of back-to-back 300 seasons. He hits 300 again in 1980. Bate McBride hits 316 in 1980. It's a pretty close deal. McBride offers better defense. All right, another little carousel. If you remember in the World Series, Philadelphia had a platoon of Wayne Cage and Otto Velez at first base. They don't anymore. They send the rights to Otto Velez to the Florida Marlins. Florida Marlins send the rights to Tim McCarver, and this is a key part of this deal, to the Mets. And then the Mets, unfortunately, begrudgingly, ship Tug McGraw to the Phillies because he played for the Phillies in 1980. Now, this is, again, about tokens. But the token, the Phillies have to pay that token for McGraw. But it's not the Mets, it's Florida who receives the token. And the reason is this guy. And you're thinking, Tim McCarver. Well, I got some news for you, folks. Tim McCarver hit 320 in 1977. And he would immediately be the New York Mets' best hitter. At least for 77. So they get something out of that. And again, the Mets, Phillies, and Reds are all making moves here. The Phillies don't get Pete Rose, obviously, at least not yet. Next move, the Cubs send the rights to Ralph Garr to the Padres, but Garr doesn't have a lot of left in the tank. No tokens needed. All right, the Padres will move a retired Fry Slavin to Colorado because they need a retired guy. Colorado sends Dick Drago, a reliever, to Oakland because they wanted to bump up their reliever, and the Padres are going to land Raleigh Fingers, who pitched for the Padres, but they're going to have to pay a token because Raleigh Fingers, is a great closer. So it costs the Padres a token. That token goes to the Oakland A's. So the Oakland A's are getting draft tokens when they lose guys like Reggie and so forth. All right, the first trade strictly involving Strat cards. Everything else is involved waivers, keepers, and retires. But Reggie Smith for Ron Fairley. Now, obviously, the Dodgers have to comp a token, and they do. The thing is, Ron Fairley actually had a pretty good 76 and 77. But it's Reggie Smith who has a good 77, 78, 79, and 80. I contemplate 2 draft tokens sometimes, but, it's not really necessary. And at least in year 1, Ron Fairley would be a pretty nice player for the Cardinals. Reggie Smith is a much better player, good defense as well. But the Dodgers, who were collecting tokens earlier for Buckner, have to fork up a token. All right, the Rangers send Jerry Martin to the Cardinals for Joe Lee. It doesn't really do much moving the needle. The Mets have to create space. They ship Bob Apodaca to Atlanta, who's desperate for any kind of pitching, for a Messersmith that the Mets will promptly put on waivers. Another move, Philadelphia shipping Willoughby. Like I said, they had to create space for Soche and McGraw to the Mets. For Boswell, sending Boswell to Arizona. And Arizona sending Braun back to the Phillies. All these guys are being retired or put on waivers anyway. Kansas City ships Mark Littell to St. Louis for Mike Wallace. The Cardinals waive him, but actually Littell does pitch for St. Louis, so they can always change their mind and elect to keep Littell if they want. But right now he's currently on waivers. We're getting to some more really lazy moves here. Atlanta, a retired Louis Gomez for a waivered Felix Millan. I don't think either of these guys hit above the Mendoza line. A waivered Alan Ashby goes to Arizona for a surprisingly retired Larry Herndon. And here's the story. The reason why he's retired is that he has a crappy 77 through 80. He comes back in a big way in 81. So the plan is for Larry Herndon to sit out a year and come back for the 78, 79, 80, 81 season. All right, now we're getting into just solidifying roster spots for the draft. The Padres, that Atkinson guy they picked up in that earlier trade, and Herndon, who they just got as a retiree, they get shipped to the Expos for Bobby Heiss, who can play some third base. San Diego sent their third baseman, Dave Chalk, to Oakland. There you go. In a move to that is because I realized that Rupert Jones and Leroy Stanton both played for the Seattle Mariners in 1977. I said, well, Atlanta, why don't you give Seattle their guys back? So they do. Rupert Jones and Leroy Stanton back to Seattle, and the Braves pick up, at least for 1 year, Lenny Randall, who's good in 77 but lousy after that, and a good Larry Bittner. So a 300 and a 290 hitter for a 280 hitter and a 300, and Stanton's 27 home runs. There's a lot of offense in this trade. All right, the Mets, knowing that they don't need a third baseman because they have Pete Rose and Ray Knight, they ship their third baseman, Mike Cubbage, to the Astros for Jerry Remy, which is a nice defensive second baseman, has some speed. So the Mets are making some smart moves, getting defense, getting some speed. Cincinnati ships an extra utility infielder, Ted Martinez, to the Giants for slick fielding first baseman Tom Hutton, who's a 1. And the Reds are going to install him at first base as an upgrade to Bob Beal. And the Giants had nobody playing second base last year. And believe it or not, this Ted Martinez at 299, he's a 3.8 at second base. And in the last move, again, the Reds, the Mets, the Phillies, they did a lot of dealing. They shipped off useless Milt May, one of 3 or 4 catchers they had, to Las Vegas for outfielder Steve Bry. The Reds needed a 4th outfielder. They have Foster, Geronimo, and Ken Griffey. So they had 2 lefties and a righty, so now they have 2 lefties and 2 righties in their outfield. Bry can come in off the bench for injuries and so forth. And so that was the carousel. And once that's done, the easy way of looking at this is all this data has been now sorted. I can now identify per team in green. These are all the guys that are being kept. And this is similar to the summer league that I did analysis of. Arizona, starting with 12, you have 6 guys from 77, 4 guys from 78, 2 guys from 79. And again, each team has 12. And 12 times 32 is the magical number of 384. Okay? Now these are Strat-O-Matic cards. These are called the carryovers. The keepers are in limbo. These, of course, are like Arizona is going to add Reggie Cleveland, a new Reggie Cleveland card, LaRoche, etc. Everybody's got 4 keepers. Notable keepers on this list. Let me scroll down for a second. Kansas City Royals. That'll be 390 hitting 1980 George Brett. Larry Gura, Dennis Leonard, Amos Otis. Kansas City's trying to make a World Series run with guys like that. Big Red Machine. They're going to bring their outfield back. Geronimo, Foster, Griffey, Morgan, of course, coming back for one more try. They lose Pete Rose, of course. Dave Tomlin, nice lefty in the bullpen. That helps them. Let's see. Let's look at the Mets and the Phillies here. So the Mets, they're going to roll out Kuzman one more time. We mentioned that McCarver hits 300. Pete Rose will hit 300. And there has to be at least one good year of Pat Zachary for the Mets to get. So I think the Mets are going to be a lot better, even though they lost Tom Seaver. The Phillies want to get back to the World Series. It'll be Carlton, Gary Maddox, Bate McBride, Tug McGraw. Now, obviously, 1980 McGraw, 1980 Carlton and McGraw makes sense. McBride has his big year in 1980, but you can't take 3 guys from one year. So Maddox and McBride have to come from a different year on that. All right, so doing the math, you have 4 teams of the 32 is 128. And then the math suggests when it's just 2 and 2, it should be 64. These guys are on waivers. So these guys can sign with any team from 1977 to 1980. Are there any good guys here? There'll be a few good guys here. Let's see. I mean, they're not going to be Hall of Famers pretty much. Otto Velez has a nice card in 1980. I mean, obviously, if these guys aren't good, that means that the league is doing a good job of assigning keepers. So that's good. Again, you're not going to, obviously, they're on waivers for a reason. I mean, but Andahar has a nice year, I think. Let's see here. So I'm scrolling through this. I think Doc Ellis has one more good year here somewhere. Mark Littell's got a good year. And then lastly, the retirees. So most of these retirees do not have a card in 1977. But some do, and it's not very good. And might even have a card 77, 78, 79, 80. But we have to account for them coming out of retirement and getting back into the league. So it's possible that, some of these guys get back into baseball. But so from this point, I'm going to stop the video right now, and I could, at this point, move into going to Baseball Reference and sort of evaluating all these players and finding out which of the 4 carryover years is their best year. And that will help organize a draft strategy. Thanks for checking out the video. We'll see you next time.